What are we going to do with them, Coco? Indeed.
Welcome back to another Harley Quinn breakdown, where today we're going to be talking about episode 3 titled The Floronic Man. Now, with this episode, it definitely didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, and definitely felt like something else is going to happen later down the road, especially as they parody a lot of these characters. Now, what we're going to do in this episode is talk about the Clayface start of it, tie in with Harley and Ivy, then go to Clayface once again, finish up his stuff, and then go back to Harley and Ivy. Because the episode starts off with Clayface in Metropolis performing a one-man show about Pearl Harbor, which has literally nothing to do about Pearl Harbor because he's acting as an Italian man 20 years prior. Just a joke to show how obscene Clayface's performances are while he's in Metropolis, not getting the attention he wants, especially after the last season where he was really famous and getting everything he ever wanted. And then after the show, he gets roasted in the Daily Planet because the show was just that bad. And it's funny because the front page is that Jason Woodrue has died in a tragic accident, showing that after the last episode, he is seemingly dead, which we all know he's been turned into the Floronic Man, but everyone else thinks this man has bitten the bullet. So what I'm guessing happened is that his body just disappeared, and they assume with all the vines everywhere that he disintegrated or something along those lines. And that's when we catch up with Ivy and Harley, where they're reading the newspaper, and they talk about how the media hates women because it didn't give Ivy the recognition for killing Jason Woodrue, which I think is kind of funny because they're not supposed to be villains, so they shouldn't be recognized in the paper for doing that. But I do love how it leads into a little complication with Harley and Ivy, where Harley talks about Ivy needs to be more honest with her, telling her about her past, even the troubled stuff. You know, trying to connect with her partner on a deeper level, which I do like because it shows that they're supposed to be supporting one another and dealing with their past trauma together. Even having a little bit of therapist Harley coming out as she tries to connect with Ivy. And I like that because it just kind of goes back to the roots where they're not strictly all villains. They're just kind of dysfunctional people. And I can't wait to see them develop even more, because that's the main part of the show everyone likes is Ivy and Harley together, and I can't wait to see more of it. Now let's jump back to the Clayface stuff and go over all his stuff from this episode after he goes to the Daily Planet to confront Perry White, which Perry White in the comics is a main Superman character who runs the Daily Planet and has a lot of interaction with Superman, Clark, Lois Lane, and Jimmy. But right before Clayface makes his appearance in the Daily Planet, we have Lois talking about how there's something weird going on in Metropolis, which is just a tease for Brainiac, which does get dove into deeper later in the episode. But first, Clayface knocks out Perry, taking him and kidnapping him, so he can write his own review to show how good Clayface really is within the Daily Planet. And I think it's kind of funny that when he's trying to write this article, all he's coming up with is his subconsciousness saying he wants to die. Because after everything that's been going on these last few seasons, I think he's just tired of it, but he can't let himself go, but his subconscious is trying to. And it's just going to lead Clayface to probably a new revelation that maybe acting is not for him. However, it doesn't go that way in this episode because he calls Bane to help him write this article. And then after they do write the article, they talk about how it's perfect. They don't even need to proofread it, which I assume was going to lead into this comedic part where they publish it in the Daily Planet. And then everyone makes fun of them because of how bad it is. Clayface pretends to be Perry White and gives Bane a job to write these articles about Clayface. And even Lois and Jimmy are confused about what the hell is going on. But with Lois and Jimmy coming into the picture, they talk about how an unidentified object has been flying through Metropolis, which is a tease for Brainiac. And when they talk about how the people are having nightmares of a skull, it's a tease to Brainiac's ship being shaped like a skull and how he's been watching over Metropolis trying to make it this perfect city, which we first saw in episode 1. Now, one of the things that's been going on with the Clayface stuff as well in this episode is while they're in their apartment, we have 2 posters from the previous seasons. Both these posters are for the Icons Only and the Hard Wayne's Gonna Fall show that Clayface did during his acting career and the shows he's performed. But that's pretty much it for Clayface this episode until the very end credits, where Clayface and Bane have been successful in taking over the Daily Planet and writing these great articles about Clayface and all his one-man performances, which I think is kind of funny that no one figured out what was going on during this episode, and Clayface now found another way to make himself look better in people's eyes. However, let's move on to the Harley and Ivy stuff, because that was the more interesting stuff during this episode rather than the random Clayface Bane side plot. At least Bane got his time to shine once again, where he's getting more of that spotlight, getting more chances, and not being pulled in as a meme over and over again. He can finally win, like last episode, having a wife and kid. But anyways, we have Harley coming in to support Ivy as she talks about the Green Initiative from Metropolis, which is pretty much just turning the city into a half city, half plant hybrid, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, it's not what everyone wants, and it's definitely not what Brainiac wants, but it makes the city look a lot better than just this pristine white city that would make you blind if the sun hit it the wrong way. And then that's where it leads into the Floronic Man reaching out to Ivy and having her go try to take a break and go into the green to relax, thinking it's just nightmares. Which the green is the elemental force that connects all plant life in the universe, which in the comics, both the Floronic Man and Swamp Thing have a connection to, which is totally why I thought Swamp Thing would make an appearance. But we have Ivy going there, getting led to the Floronic Man as he breaks out of the giant white oak and confronts her in his more classic comic book look, where they make fun of him for looking terrible. Which in the last episode, I thought they were going to go with the more DC Rebirth era of comics, with him being a little bit more bulky or tree looking, but they went with more of his classic look that definitely does look a lot weirder. Which makes sense for the show, so they could easily poke fun at him. And the jokes they made during it were funny, especially when Frank came in and started roasting the shit out of the Floronic Man. And speaking of Frank, that's when we have Harley finding Ivy being taken over after she getting her ass beaten during the fight with the Floronic Man. She's not able to take him on in the green because he has a better connection and is able to overpower her. And in the comics, he did have a connection in the green a little bit stronger than Swamp Thing at one point and was able to beat Swamp Thing and becoming the avatar of the green. Harley goes through her phone to see who she can call to help Ivy to connect with the green, and we see a bunch of DC villains in her phone. We get Manta, Calendar Man, Captain Nicole, Cheetah, Clock King, D-Trap, Felix Fox, Firefly, Killer Croc, Livewire, which ironically, out of all those people, other than Frank, of course, who is the one she calls because he can connect to the green, is Firefly. Firefly actually could have been useful here because they could have just burnt up the Floronic Man to a crisp. But first, she would have had to know that she needed to do that, which is where she gets the idea from Frank. And I do love how she calls Frank, and Frank jumps into the green to see what the hell is going on, just to be shocked for a moment, go out to Harley, tell her to go find the body, and Frank to go in to help. And I think Frank's scenes are just hilarious so far. It's just a funny comedic moment of him coming in to help, making fun of the Floronic Man, and when the Floronic Man finds out Frank is there, and it's the one he remembers as a baby, when he says, "I am," and Ivy cuts him off saying the Floronic Man, they make fun of him, which I thought was funny because it's making fun of the Floronic part of his name, which honestly is kind of a weird name, and I totally thought in the moment he was going to say, "I am your father," because in the last episode, Jason Woodward tried to take credit for Frank being created in his lab. So I thought that would have been a way of him trying to manipulate Frank into thinking that Ivy's been lying to him this entire time and that he is actually his true father, which would have been a cool little Star Wars reference, but it didn't go that way. But then we had Harley running around to find the Floronic Man, and then the way they beat him is she just cuts him up with a little chainsaw. And I thought this was going to be her like getting a blowtorch or something and lighting him on fire and burning him up that way. But the way they did it definitely feels like they didn't kill him. Because if they cut him up like that and he was able to regrow himself, and he's connected to the green and connected to plant life, I don't think just cutting him up that way will kill him entirely. I think by doing that, it definitely did cut off his connection from being able to take down Poison Ivy in the green, but I do think he'll make his return at some point as he reconstitutes himself into a new form, which could go that new DC Rebirth look with him being more of a bulkier tree, especially because it feels weird to introduce him last episode just to kill him in this episode, which again, I thought Swamp Thing was going to come in to be like, who the hell are you in the green and why are you taking control, and have him like help Poison Ivy deal with this creature. But with the way the show parodies a lot of characters, they do tend to weaken a lot of them and make them really easy for Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn to beat. I just have a feeling we're not done with the Floronic Man just yet. But at least after this, we had a good moment with Harley and Ivy coming to terms with they have to be open with each other to talk about their problems and not lie about anything, which I think is just a good moment to have these two realize what they mean to each other and that, you know, they can help each other out with their problems if they just talk about it. But then that leads into them being captured by Brainiac because neither of them are supposed to be in Metropolis, making it an imperfect city, just like how we saw in the first episode. Now, with them getting pulled into space, it's making me think that this is what Brainiac is doing to a bunch of the villains, because now Metropolis is starting to get a bunch of Gotham villains like King Shark, Bane, Clayface, and I feel like Brainiac is going to try to remove all of them out of that society so it can be a perfect society and he can bottle it like he does with the city of Kandor and other cities from around the galaxy. And now I'm also thinking that Lena is most likely working with Brainiac to make it a perfect city because she's been using his bots and they're the ones that are capturing people, and I'm curious to see how they portray him and parody him a little bit more during the season. Plus, we have him having a little white monkey named Coco, which is a character from the comics which lived aboard Brainiac's ship and first appeared during Action Comics 242 from 1958. So a little cool deep cut from a character I've never heard of before. When I first heard his name, I'm like, you know what, this is definitely a comic book character, but I thought he was parodying someone else. I didn't think it was actually a little monkey that lived on his ship, which I think is cool, and I'm curious to see what else they're going to do and pull from the comics that most people would have never heard from. And you know what, at the end of the day, this episode had fun moments. I feel like the Clayface and Bane stuff went on a little too long, but it was nice to see Clayface make his return this season. And I do really like Harley and Ivy working together and having the relationship be worked on and have them kind of grow together. So I'm curious to see how they're going to kind of move forward after this. And I'm curious just to see what they do with Brainiac, honestly, because Brainiac is such a big Superman villain and we haven't seen him yet in the show. And I want to see kind of how, again, I want to see how they parody him and how much of a meme he becomes. Because obviously Harley and Ivy are going to be able to beat him. That's just where the show is going to go. But maybe it might require some more help from some of their obscure friends from around the DC universe. But let me know after watching this episode, what did you think of it? And were there any other Easter eggs and references you noticed during it? Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And you get to stay up to date with all my DC and Marvel breakdowns. And speaking of Marvel breakdowns, my Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man breakdown for episode 1 and 2 is now live. So make sure you go check that one out if you're a Spider-Man fan. And I'll have it linked at the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next week when it's time to watch another episode of Harley Quinn.